All right, guys, hello from Europe. I know you guys have missed me as I've been on vacation, but obviously I dropped some interviews that had been in the vault, and probably chief among them, I enjoyed them all, but obviously was the Ye interview. It caused quite a splash, and I'm so glad that it did because for me, it felt like I was getting something off of my chest that was on my chest for 2 years. And so today's episode is going to be a little bit different because there is so much more that I want to say about the things that happened off camera, the things that were said to me off camera by Ye at that time. And I finally feel that the world is ready to hear those things. So I'm just going to rant at you for basically like 45 minutes. I hope that is okay. That's what's coming up on Candace. Ugh. Genuinely, that was the sound effect when I was finally able to release this interview. It is just not a typical thing to have something that powerful be locked into a time capsule, but I never ever question God's timing, and I truly feel that it was not the right time. I feel that if I had dropped that interview when I had recorded it back in 2022, the world would not have been so kind or so receptive because we were all being inundated with the press telling us every second of every day that he was crazy, that he was unhinged, that he was an anti-Semite, and even those of us who feel that we have a very steely mind, like we are guarded against propaganda, we too fall victim to it. We too will look at an article or look at something that's being said and be like, well, there must be something in here that's true if every single journalist around the world is saying that he's having a mental breakdown and his marriage is failing. And so, of course, as you guys were able to see, there was a lot more that was at work, and I was able to speak to him in a way that really represented the eye of the storm of the press that was coming at him. Really, for some things, fair. He gave them a lot of fodder, but I would also say that what led to him having those outbursts, as you saw, was something very concrete. The press was reacting in that way because there was a truth, a modicum of truth that he was trying to share that they wanted to make sure that they buried. And fortunately, now that time has passed, we are able to discuss what that truth is in a more meaningful capacity. So I first just want to jump into reading some of your comments regarding the Ye episode. Jeremiah wrote, Ye seems way more comfortable here than I've seen him in any other interview. Yes, because he realized that he was stepping into a space that was not the mainstream media. It was actually just my house, and we were recording with a camera, and he knew that I was not trying to get a headline or trying to antagonize him or make him look crazy, so he was able to actually say what it was that he had lived through. Marco wrote, and this is a quote from Ye himself, I'm not out of control, I'm just not in the control. Yeah, that is a very strong quotation from Ye. And I would almost say, now having lived through what I have lived through on the other end of that, that really is the marker of whether or not the press is going to hate you. If they feel that they can instill some sort of control over you or control over a certain narrative that they want you to sell to the public, then they are your friend. If not, they certainly turn against you. Old New Mama wrote, Ye has been so gaslit and called crazy for simply telling us what's really up in Hollywood. He literally sacrificed his career for us, and I believe him and am thankful for him. He's a true talent and has a great heart. I pray he soon finds his way back to Jesus. And this really is the genesis of what I want to speak to you about today, what he was trying to expose in Hollywood and some things that I have found out since that it's obviously going to get me into a lot of trouble for saying a lot of this stuff, but I'm comfortable with that because I really do believe that it is just God time, that we are all supposed to speak out against a lot of this satanic stuff that's happening. And like I say, I don't say the term satanic to be dramatic. Like, I hope you understand that there are people, as if you're watching this podcast series, you are understanding that there are people who are making an investment and believe and worship and follow the devil, and they are completely trying to, it's essentially create an inverse of the Bible. More on that in a second, but I just want to read this last comment from Thaddeus. He wrote, it was quite genius to stash this interview. Ye is so futuristic that sometimes it only starts to make sense to people 2 to 3 years after he says it. Yes. That is where I want to start, because when everything was happening, because I am not the same visionary that I believe that Ye is, I did not know. I want to be honest with you. I did not know what on earth he was talking about. He was saying so much to me so fast. He was obviously very riled up. He was losing, on the outside, losing absolutely everything, right? The Adidas deal, the Gap deal, his wife, his marriage was collapsing. And so you can only imagine when all of that is happening, he's losing his billionaire status. The entire world hates him. He's being kicked out of polite society. Ari Emanuel's writing a letter saying no one should work with him ever again in Hollywood because he's a raging anti-Semite. So you can only imagine that obviously I did not know what could inspire anybody to blow up their life in that regard. Like, what are you doing? Can you take it one step at a time? Yay, is what I was thinking. And the stuff that he was saying to me genuinely didn't make sense because I didn't have the information. And I will tell you, there was this frustration. Like, we were bumping heads because he essentially was expecting me to understand what he was saying and to react to what he was trying to tell me as if I had the same information. I'm not from Hollywood. I've never worked with agents and lawyers. I don't know what goes on in Hollywood. When you say to me, as he did, that they killed Michael Jackson, it's quite a heavy thing. They killed Michael Jackson, Candace. I'm going, what are you talking about? At that time, in 2022, I believed the yellow journalistic perspective that Michael Jackson was some sort of a pedophile, had weird relationships with children. And so Ye just blurting out that they killed Michael Jackson didn't make sense to me. He also brought up to me the Khazarian kingdom. Literally was asking me if I knew about Khazars. And again, if you're watching this series now and we're starting to speak about things historical, speaking about who the Khazars were, who the Khazars potentially are, it's just stunning to me that Kanye had all this information and was frustrated with me because I think he thought at some point that I was playing a game with him. He's like, you're very smart. You know, you read tons of books. You have to know what it is I'm speaking about. And I'm going, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. Then he starts accusing me of being controlled by Zionists. And I'm going, what on earth are you talking about? I just want to do my show. But because I'm someone who has seen the progression of Ye's career, as I've said to you, I was a fan of his music. I felt that his music gave me the code, as in the strength to be myself unapologetically, because I have seen so many times when the press throughout his career had called him crazy. And then just as Thaddeus is writing here in the comments, a few years later, the press would be like, oh, actually, he was right. Or rather, the fans would realize that he wasn't saying it in the most eloquent way. You know, no one has ever accused Ye of being an eloquent speaker, but the points that he was delivering as time progressed, we recognized were valid. And so I wanted to create that space for him to make those points I didn't understand, with the understanding that in a few years, it could make a lot of sense, and make a lot of sense it certainly has. So I want to walk you through some of the things that I've learned since. So first and foremost, the moment I think that was the strongest for me, and I hope that for you guys back at home and obviously reading your comments, you have now understood why I was so cagey and I would not say anything about Ye. Because imagine your friend coming to you telling you that he was placed on a Psych 5150 hold from his gym trainer who colluded with a doctor to give him a diagnosis and then feed that diagnosis to TMZ so that the entire world thought that he was crazy while he was in the hospital for a breakdown that he didn't believe that he was having. So just to jog your memory, let's take a listen to that clip from the conversation.
Do you believe that you have bipolar? Who told you you were bipolar? And when were you told that in 2015?
Exactly. I was told that by a Jewish doctor, and the information was put out by a Jewish Hollywood trainer to the Jewish media.
Mm-hmm.
And actually the day when they put me in the hospital, I had started reading the Bible really heavy and rewriting Bible verses. And when the Jewish trainer saw, and you're like looking like, well, that sounds pretty bipolar. But the Jewish trainer saw that, put me in the hospital, and then said, and then put it in the press. And
the press being TMZ broke it, right?
Yeah, I don't remember. I was in the hospital, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
why were you in the hospital?
Exhaustion.
Couple of points there that I want you to pay attention to. First, he says a Jewish doctor. Secondly, he says that he was put into the hospital for exhaustion. How many times have we read those headlines that an actor or an actress or a singer was put into the hospital, like I had to go into the hospital for exhaustion? I mean, I'm mom to 3 kids. I had 3 kids under 3. Very tired all the time. Never have had to go into the hospital for exhaustion. And least of all, because my gym trainer suggested that I do that. That almost seems to be an exclusively Hollywood thing in general. All right, guys, just jumping in really quickly to remind you of one of my sponsors who is doing the most important work right now, and that is Preborn, because they are literally rescuing babies' lives. We all know what's going on right now in the world. Planned Parenthood continues to rake in billions despite dwindling clients. And the reason for that is because they generate vast profits, which include our tax dollars, the taxpayer funding. Well, with Preborn, that's you and me, we are actively able to steal away their clientele, meaning that we get to rescue babies that they are trying to kill. As I've told you many times, Preborn operates on a very slim budget. They rescue over 200 babies' lives every single day, and they receive absolutely no government funding. Preborn network of clinics is situated in the darkest corners of the nation because they compete head-to-head with the abortion giants, and they need our help now more than ever. When you donate just $28 to Preborn, you will offer a free ultrasound to an expectant mother that is caught in a crisis, because once she hears the baby's heartbeat, everything changes. Literally, the baby's chance at life more than doubles. So please sponsor a precious baby's life today. Your tax-deductible gift will go directly towards saving babies' lives. You just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby. Or you can go to preborn.com/Candace. Again, that's preborn.com/Candace. And then, of course, obviously, those of you guys that are following me on Locals, I finally released the book list, the books that I have been reading that have, I would just say, exploded my mind and made me realize that something more sinister is going on. But among them, quite accidentally, I stumbled into the history of Sigmund Freud, recognizing that this whole concept of telling someone that they're crazy was created by Sigmund Freud. You hear things in the history about, women being told that they're hysterical. Feminists are always on this tip. Oh, telling women that she's crazy all the time. And they say that it dates back and men would always accuse a woman of being hysterical. Well, actually, where that came from was Sigmund Freud, a person that is celebrated in our textbooks. And he is, in fact, a Galician Jew. I would say he's not a Jew, though, because he doesn't follow the Torah. He actually is a Kabbalist. That's what this book by David Bacon, who was a Jewish historian, wrote. He wrote about Sigmund Freud and all of the implications that he created psychoanalysis as a means to mainstream the Kabbalah. Fascinating book, fully recommend that you read it. I'll give you, in fact, the full title of it is Sigmund Freud and the Jewish Mystical Tradition. More fascinating is the fact that Sigmund Freud, who had nothing to do, his first 30 years of his life, he had absolutely nothing to do with psychoanalysis, and suddenly decided to have a major career pivot after, and it is heavily implied in this book, his father let him know that he was a Kabbalist. There is an understanding that they don't tell you about this mystical tradition in your family until you are at least 30 years of old, because the secrets of the Kabbalah are considered so powerful that they can't be entrusted to somebody that's young. And so it tells you that when he was 35 years old, his father gifted him with this Hebrew Bible. And then suddenly Sigmund Freud's life transformed, and he starts writing these weird letters to his friend, who also happened to be a pedophile. Wilhelm Fliess was his name. Wilhelm Fliess, factually speaking, molested his son Robert. And he sort of lets him know that, oh, what if there was this religion and this secret society and people were in it, basically letting his friend know that he was now aware of the fact of why he was coming across so many patients, so many women that he was seeing who were saying that they were molested by their fathers. And at first, this was a point of frustration for him, because when he took it to his superiors in Vienna, other psychologists, they kind of dismissed him, and he was frustrated by that. And then suddenly he was not frustrated by it. And he was like, oh, now I sort of understand. And so what he created was a means to, as these women were coming in saying, I'm being molested, to instead tell these women, to diagnose these women with hysteria. Literally, you're just crazy. Actually, what you have is attraction to your father. This is very significant, okay? So people were coming in to say, I am being abused. And Sigmund Freud is considered a hero. He is considered breakthrough psychologist, because what he actually did was he gave, in my view, a cult of psychopaths a means to gaslight the world, right? To gaslight the clients into thinking there was something wrong with them for recognizing that they had been abused. And so the idea of hysteria was born by Sigmund Freud. So I read that book and I went, okay, well, that's extremely interesting. And I didn't know this about Sigmund Freud. And then when I revealed in an episode that somebody who had worked for the Sigmund Freud Archive Center as the director of the Archive Center, a Jewish man who should be celebrated, by the way, for his bravery, Jeffrey Masson. When Jeffrey Masson, who was a Harvard grad, got this dream job working at the Sigmund Freud Archive Center and was on the fast track to become the new director of it, decided to learn German so he could read those archives, he discovered that Sigmund Freud was covering up for pedophiles. Silly Jeffrey thought that if he went out to the world and shared this information, that people would go, oh my gosh, you uncovered a massive secret, and now we're going to take down Sigmund Freud and rip him out of textbooks. Well, the exact opposite thing happened. The press turned on him. He started getting attacked by the press. He ended up in a lawsuit spanning 10 years because he was defamed by The New Yorker. And he won the lawsuit, and then they won the appeal, back and forth, 10 years of his life fighting because he was being defamed in the press for trying to expose the fact that Sigmund Freud was a pedophile. So you can discern from his letters that Sigmund Freud's father was a pedophile, that Sigmund Freud was covering up for pedophiles. We also know as a fact down the line his grandson, a man named Clement Freud, it was revealed recently that he was also a pedophile. He's a tremendously powerful man, by the way, in the UK, so that should terrify us all. And so we know that this is a line of pedophiles. And what came from that Freud family line? Well, I told you Edward Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew. He's considered the father of propaganda. Okay, you guys connecting the dots here. So you have psychoanalysis, then becomes propaganda. And we're starting to realize that they understood that through the use of yellow journalism, they could get people to believe anything and cover up severe crimes. Now, it's interesting because he also was bringing up to me, I'm referring to Kanye West now, was bringing up to me the idea that there were these gangs in Hollywood. And this is something that keeps rearing its ugly head. And now it's being called an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. I spoke about the plausibility that there were gangs. Obviously, because so many artists keep saying that there are, Michael Jackson among them said that there were a gang of people that were colluding to ruin his life, that all of the articles that were coming out about him was just a form of yellow journalism. He did, in the end, win his lawsuits, and the kids that were at his estate spoke out like Macaulay Culkin did and said, he never touched me, none of this ever happened. In reality, he was at war with Sony, and for Kanye to bring this information to me to say, MJ was killed, even that seemed like really far out to me until I got my hands on this book. Now, this looks really beat up because I had to get this book on eBay. This book is entitled Hollywood Babylon. It is written by somebody named Kenneth Anger. And I will tell you who Kenneth Anger was just based off of his Wikipedia. He was an American underground experimental filmmaker, an actor, and a writer, working exclusively in short films. He produced almost 40 works beginning in 1937. Anger's films variously merged surrealism with homoeroticism and the occult. He himself was an occultist. He considered himself fascinated with Aleister Crowley. Now, again, if you're watching this podcast, you're realizing that I keep finding this guy popping up. Aleister Crowley, the occult. We talked about NASA, how this religion he established called Thelema became not just mainstream amongst the elites. I mean, they didn't even care. They were just throwing sexual rituals trying to summon demons. And the fact that this information is freely available on the web and the majority of us don't know it, to me, is a bit of a conspiracy, right? The fact that he was welcomed in polite society, was loved and adored by elite politicians in the West, it should make us go, what's really going on here? So anyways, getting into this book, you're not going to believe this. I guess I'll ask you a question here. What could be in a book or in a conversation that would warrant it getting banned? Why was my conversation with Kanye banned? Why was any conversation with Kanye banned in 2022? Now that you listen to the conversation, you're like, well, that wasn't a crazy conversation. The media had me thinking he was just like hyped up. Why weren't we allowed to listen to Kanye speak? Why, similarly, when this book was published in 1965 in America, was this book banned? They took it off the shelves. This is blowing my mind, by the way, because I can't even figure out how they did that legally. Like, this is America. You can't just ban books. But apparently this book got banned, okay? Kenneth Anger writes this book called Hollywood Babylon. And it gets banned and it's not allowed to go into print again until 1975 in America. So when I wanted to get my hands on this, having come across it in some of my researching, I had to have Savannah, my manager, get a copy of it on eBay. Like somebody who was selling. That's why it's all beat up, because it's from a very long time ago. And now I know why this book is banned. Now I understand why the Kanye conversation was banned. It's because if there is a truth that is being hidden, the best way to get rid of it is to simply tell people, just to sensationalize it, right? Like I said, yellow journalism. It's crazy. This is far out there. Well, this book from a Hollywood insider is absolutely shocking. And I just wanted to read you some portions of it because I suspect that many of you guys will be trying to get your hands on a copy of it on eBay soon. But, it just tells the story of how Hollywood was actually established. And I don't think that that's something that many of us think about. We just assume, I don't know, Hollywood was always there. I don't know what we think. We don't think about it because really the golden age of Hollywood was the 1920s. And none of us, or at least not many of us, I don't think any of us were alive in the 1920s. And so we just accept that motion pictures became a thing somehow. And maybe in our mind, we don't recognize that so much debauchery took place, that essentially these were the carnival people that just realized they could make money by creating all of these characters. But what he establishes in this book, Kenneth Anger, is that the intention of creating Hollywood was to create a sort of demonic religion. So I'm just going to read you about even how they were naming the theaters at the time cathedrals, like this inverse again of religion. So he's talking about how people were racing at this time to cathedrals. And he writes, one more stupefying picture than the next sprung up in cities across the land to accommodate the well-heeled faithful. The multitudes flocked to the darkened temples where the flickering shadows danced, fleeting visions of erotic and exciting deities born through the somehow wicked and wonderful darkness on a lush groundswell from a symphony orchestra. They were wander sanctuaries where millions worshipped from the depths of lodges. Their idols on the Argentine altar on high were huge, disembodied countenances of awesome gods and adorable goddesses matched their marcelled pastel profiles while mounting mute, blessedly inaudible nothings. All over the world, this novel and pagan religion flowered and left its offerings before crossing the sacred precinct. This religion, enormously lucrative for its perpetrators, as cynical as they were shameless, was just old, heathen, hedonistic body worship, dolled up in a new disguise, the adoration of the stars of Hollywood, USA. It was an illusion, a tease, a fraud. It was almost as much fun as the old-time religion, without blood on the altars, but the blood would come. He then talks about, the star worship of the heavenly bodies began when the flickering figures doffed their anonymity, creating all of these characters, Charlie Chaplin, all of them having names that were not actually their names. Never have so few, for the Hollywood stars of the first magnitude were never more than a select few, a charmed circle, furnished masturbation fodder for so many. No other religion can make that statement. Okay, I hate to interrupt again, but I have to tell you guys about American financing. I know the stress, the economic stress that so many people are going through right now, feeling like you are constantly having to put your expenses on a credit card, which obviously only increases the stress because you're trying to find a way out of the never-ending cycle of debt. Well, here's something you can do. You can call my friends at American Financing. They're helping people just like you turn things around by using the equity in their homes to pay off high-interest debt. They understand what you're going through, and they talk to people in your position every single day. American Financing is saving their borrowers an average of $854 a month, which when you total it comes to effectively a $10,000 a year raise. And if you want to get started, you may not even have to pay next month's mortgage payment if you call them today. There is no better time than right now to turn your situation around, so call 800-795-1210. That's 800-795-1210, or you can visit americanfinancing.net/Owens. Again, that's americanfinancing.net/Owens. So as you get onto this book, he starts telling you the stories, and you realize, and when he says about blood sacrifice, and he starts speaking about what was going on in Hollywood in the 20s, that essentially this book was banned because he just spelled out how actors and actresses were being murdered. And they were being murdered. There were plots with their lawyers, their agents, essentially exactly what Michael Jackson and Ye were trying to communicate, that there is essentially a gang and a cabal in Hollywood. They've always been there. In fact, these agents and these lawyers sprang up out of literal gangs. Like, these were dope dealers that then became agents, that then became owners of motion pictures, who were killing each other and killing actors and actresses who were trying to get out. It tells various stories, but there's just two of them that I actually wanted to bring to your attention because I think they're really relevant. The first is of this young actress named Olive Thomas. I mean, this girl was 20 years old, and she was known as a person who had her life together. She had a squeaky clean image. And then one night in France, she's just found dead in her bed. She was holding, when the person knocked on the door, when the valet opened the door, she was holding tightly to a bottle of very deadly bichloride of mercury tablets. The suite was registered in the name of Mrs. Jack Pickford, known to millions of adoring fans as the bright young star of the American screen, Olive Thomas. Okay. So she gets killed, and it's heavily implied here that she was killed, and they tried to make it look like an overdose, and the public didn't believe that it was an overdose. So they then took to yellow journalism about her and began making up stories, just salacious stories, accusing her of having a drug addiction with absolutely no proof. And the public was shocked by this. Like, how could this innocent girl who we've come to love on our screens, you're telling us that she was secretly a drug addict? And it worked. Every single time they did this form of yellow journalism, when they wanted people to look the other way and not to believe that something criminal had taken place, they would just suddenly say that the stars were either drug addicts or they were crazy. Just repeat this over and over again. I think most stunning was this story of an actor, and he was considered the king of Paramount, this actor. His name was Wally Reed, and they institutionalized him. And what was really going on was he was worth a lot of money for Paramount. They needed to get rid of him. And so they actually used his wife, right, and institutionalized him, got her to sign off on papers somehow, basically saying that he had a morphine addiction. And so she played the part and said, oh, he's addicted to morphine. And once again, America was stunned because he had a squeaky clean image. And they essentially, and I'm just going to read this directly, Paramount Pictures issued some euphemisms about Reed's quote-unquote overwork. Oh, exhaustion. Reed had exhaustion, but soon, no less a source, that Mrs. Wallace Reed informed the press that her beloved husband was undergoing a cure for morphine addiction. So again, using the wives to assure the public that the husbands are actually insane, that they need to be institutionalized. Again, this is way too familiar of a pattern. The sensational news that Wally Reed was a drug addict struck the American public at large like a rawhide whip across the face. Wally was not just an immensely popular Hollywood movie star. He was the vital symbol of young American manhood. Blue-eyed, chestnut-haired Wally was a handsome, cheerful, strapping, 6'3" giant of a man, and he possessed acting ability as well as youth and good looks. So they were shocked. They literally put this actor into a padded cell, okay? This is in 1922. He spent the rest of 1922 within that padded cell in the secluded sanitarium. Stark muffled his imprecations like a mad Nebuchadnezzar against the world at large, against Hollywood, against Zucker. This was the president of Paramount. Above all else, against his wife. He seemed to have forgotten his young son, whom the fan magazines doted on as the picture of his dad. Going on, it says that Wally died in his padded cell on January 18th, 1923. An ugly rumor circulated within the film colony that he had been, quote-unquote, put to sleep. Many knew or thought that they knew the reasons why. Quite stunning. His wife said that the bohemian lifestyle is what drove him to drinking and debauchery, and that there were these Hollywood hellraisers that got him addicted to morphine. And we'll never know what happened in that padded cell. We'll never know what were the reasons that there was collusion amongst these executives This is Zucker, Jess Lasky, who had a $2 million stake in Reed, and all of them agreed that it was best that Wally be kept out of sight. Again, these were the people that were running Paramount Pictures. We'll never know what actually happened, but it is heavily implied that he was put into the cell, and then the world was told that he was insane from an actor that they loved on their screens. So you can imagine how much this book has sent a chill up my spine now, with hindsight being 2020, and realizing that now so much of what Ye was trying to communicate to me was very plausible, like this conspiracy of agents working with lawyers, working sometimes with people's managers and agents to effectively get somebody kicked out of Hollywood via the means of yellow journalism, just lying profusely about somebody. You can imagine now my understanding of the facts surrounding the MJ case, that he went to war with Sony, one of these major companies, and he was winning that war. And then suddenly the world was told that Michael Jackson, and I was someone who believed it, because like I said, not many of us can really resist when there's that much insistence from the press that somebody is crazy or somebody is a pedophile or somebody is an anti-Semite. Michael Jackson, I think, was called all of those things. Wacko Jacko, they gave him a name. The exact same tactics that they had been using since the dawn of Hollywood. The exact same tactics that they tried to use on me. This is what happened when I was effectively kicked out. It was like a button was pressed. I was fed to the ADL overnight. It seemed literally overnight. Someone pressed a button, and there was a full court press effort to cancel Candace Owens by trying to convince the people that she just went crazy and anti-Semitic. Maybe they would have if they had had the means to. Thank goodness I'm not from Hollywood. They would have institutionalized me and said that it was for my good. Maybe they would have had a family member on payroll that would have come out and said, we recognized that suddenly at 35 years old that Candace Owens had bipolar disorder. It's very important that we start recognizing these tactics and realizing that there are a ton of people in Hollywood who, when they have tried to speak out about things that are happening to them, have received this same treatment. I believe this is what happened to Britney Spears. I believe that Britney Spears, for whatever reason, was, and there's a term for this now, MK Ultra'd. Okay. Now, of course, that last portion came to me when I read the book Chaos. Again, all of these things unrelated, me being interested in a variety of topics, but recognizing that doctors in the CIA had come up with a program and essentially were trying to find a means to give people mental disorders. MKUltra program, COINTELPRO, they were fascinated with trying to essentially control minds. That was a real program. It's worked, and one of the means in which minds are controlled is by the mainstream media, by propaganda, which you could say is the spawn of the work of a bunch of pedophiles. That is the reality. Pedophiles created propaganda, and this book spells how many pedophiles were in the industry. It talks about blackmail. It talks about pedophilia. It speaks about all of these topics in a way that's quite jarring, and it makes you understand that Hollywood has always been a tremendous evil. Hollywood has always effectively been Babylon, and they have been trying to essentially find people to do their bidding, right? To convince people to follow evil, to propagandize the world into a variety of sins, encouraging sin. I mean, that really is what Hollywood has been about since its genesis. Taking a quick break. I know we're having a great conversation, but there's a way that you can drink coffee, have great conversations, support this show, and that's if you start drinking 7 Weeks Coffee. I'm really excited to tell you guys about that because it aligns perfectly with our mission to rescue lives. Why is it called 7 Weeks Coffee? Well, because at 7 weeks of development, a baby is the size of a coffee bean, and it's the first time that a heartbeat is clearly detected on an ultrasound. That's why they donate 10% of every sale to support ultrasound services at pregnancy care centers across the country. Now, I want to be clear, the coffee is fantastic. They are super specific about what they are putting into your bodies. The coffee is mold-free, pesticide-free, shade-grown, low acidic, and it's organically farmed. Plus, it comes from the top 1% to 2% of beans in the world. Here's what you need to know. 7 Weeks Coffee is launching an exciting new initiative. It's called Drink More Coffee, Save More Lives, exclusively for my listeners. When you subscribe, you'll save 15% and you'll get a free Drink Coffee, Save Lives tote bag on your first order. Everybody needs a new tote, right? That's not all. Exclusively for my audience, if you use code Candace at checkout, you'll save an additional 10%, giving you a total of 25% savings on your first order. So go to 7weekscoffee.com and use code Candace to save 25% off. Again, that's 7weekscoffee.com, code Candace at checkout for 25% off. You know, when you get through that chaos book, you realize that the CIA worked with Dr. Jolly West, worked with Sidney Gottlieb, and they wanted to be able to control people in Hollywood. And so I'll give you my perspective and my belief. I believe that Kanye West was MK Ultra'd. I think that obviously the person who played a part in having that done was Harley Pasternak, his trainer. And I'm going to read you what the press ignored at the time when Kanye was tweeting about, quote unquote, the Jews. It's still stunning to me that the press ignored him saying that Harley Pasternak was a piece of this puzzle that lent to his frustration. Ye tweeted, "What should be obvious by now is that I was raised to stand for my truth regardless of the consequences, so I will say this again. I was mentally misdiagnosed and nearly drugged out of my mind to make me a manageable, well-behaved celebrity." The message that he shared from Harley Pasternak was, "I'm going to help you one of a couple of ways. First, you and I sit down and have a loving and open conversation, but you don't use cuss words, and everything that is discussed is based in fact and not some crazy stuff that dumb friend of yours told you or you saw in a tweet. Second option, I have you institutionalized again, where they medicate the crap out of you, and you go back to Zombieland forever. Playdate with the kids just won't be the same." Just ask you guys watching this right now, do your personal trainers speak to you like that? What connections do your personal trainers have that they can get you institutionalized and drugged? And now that we know for a fact, due to declassified CIA documents, that they were able to create a cocktail to give people mental disorders as a mechanism to control them, how does that text message read to you? If Kanye is crazy, it's because they tried to make him crazy. They wanted to do with Kanye what they managed to do, in my view, to Britney Spears. And it's incredibly important that we continue to provide him a platform to speak about what exactly it is that is going on in Hollywood. Because as I said, from the beginning of time, it has been a tale that is tremendously sinister and only seems to be growing more sinister by the year. Anyways, that is all I want to say on that topic, you guys, and I can't wait to see your thoughts.